Hello, everybody.
Oh, hello.
Today we are going to be starting a new series. It's going to probably be like 3 or 4 videos max, and it's going to be all about deck building. So I am just going to put out there to start off, I am not necessarily the best deck builder in the world. So what I'm going to be doing in future videos is hopefully bringing people in to give their expertise on deck building in various styles. And yeah, you're not just going to be hearing it from me. I know I make future format decks, but anybody can do what I do to some degree if you just have a knowledge of the card pool. But some people out there are just very, very good at it. So hopefully this series of videos will help you figure out how to build a variety of different types of decks. Now, today's video is just going to be about the basics. How to build a deck. If you are new to the Pokemon card game, relatively, I think this is a good video to start, just to understand like what a deck of Pokemon is, what it consists of, and maybe how you should think about building it, because you may only have experience with theme decks, right? This is just going to be a starter video to sort of kick everything off. So if you're like super duper experienced, stick around if you want. I'm not going to be, breaking any ground, but maybe these fundamental principles will also help you in deck building, because that's just how I, and I'm sure other people might think of it as well. But without further ado, let's just jump into it. So the very first thing to know about deck building for the Pokemon card game is that a deck is 60 cards. You have 60 cards in a deck to work with. No more, no less. This isn't like other card games where you can have like, they're called sideboards or something, where you can change decks in between games. It's not like other card games too, where you have a maximum and a minimum. No, flat 60, it has to be that amount. But that 60 cards can be basically any set of 60 with a couple of rules. One rule that's very important is that you can only have 4 of any given card. So, example, if you have Charizard, right? You can only have 4 cards called Charizard, not 4 of a specific Charizard. Important to remember. Sometimes you can have, there might be available to you 3 different Pikachus, let's say, from different sets. You can still only have 4 Pikachus total. Doesn't matter what sets they're in. You can mix or match them, but there still can only be 4. Now, other things that have like GX or V are considered different names. So you could have 4 Pikachu GX and 4 Pikachu, because those are considered different names entirely. That's just something to know. You can only have 4 of any named card in your deck. Prism Star cards, if you're watching this while that is still legal, Prism Star cards you can only have 1 of in a deck. It will say that on the card. So just read the cards. Everyone says this in Verbank, but just read the card carefully. And if it's a special looking card, it might have some text on it that says you can only have 1 of these in a deck. Those are super high level, rules level basics. Now we can talk about what kind of cards are in a deck. Broadly speaking, the very broadest way, there are 3 kinds of cards that exist in the Pokemon world. There are Pokemon, which are exactly what you would think. They are the Pokemon, the things that do the attacking. There are trainer cards. Trainer cards are all of the not Pokemon cards and not energy cards that you can play in a deck. There are different types of trainers. You have items, you have supporters, you have tool cards. Those are the types of trainer cards, but those cards help you do things in your deck that are special that aren't attacks or aren't abilities on Pokemon. And then finally, you have energy. So the 3 kinds of cards, you have Pokemon, trainers, and energy cards. And you can have any combination in terms of numbers of those. There's no limit to saying you don't have to have just 20, 20, and 20 in a 60 card deck. You can have a deck that is 1 Pokemon and 59 energy if you really wanted. It probably wouldn't be a very good deck, but it would be allowed, right? And in terms of your energy, there's a variety of energy that you can choose from. And there's no limit to how many of any type of energy or how many different types you can have in a deck. Just Whatever energy you want to put in there, you can put in there. So those are just like the highest level basics. I know this is very basic if you're already familiar with the game, but I think it's important to know these different types of cards before we go any further. In terms of deck building, now that you sort of know what the deck can consist of, let's start with the first principle to remember, which is you have to start somewhere, right? You can either start with a win condition that you're interested in, or you can start with a special Pokemon or card that really sparks your interest. In terms of win conditions, there are basically, I want to say, are there technically 3 win conditions? There's definitely 2 win conditions. One is you take all of your prizes before your opponent does. So you have 6 prizes to start a game. If you take your prizes by knocking their Pokemon out, usually, before your opponent, you win the game. That's the most common win condition. So most of the decks you're going to see that you're going to build, Pokemon, etc., they are going to try to play into knocking out your opponent's Pokemon to take prize cards. The other win condition is milling your opponent, which means you or your opponent usually, hopefully, loses if they don't have any more cards in their deck at the start of their turn. If you go to draw at the start of your turn and there's no cards left, you lose. So that is another win condition. I would say that win condition is not as common to play, to build decks for, as taking your prizes. And those are usually very specialized decks. I'm not going to get into that as an example today. Let me know if you want me to do a mill deck building video. I'm certainly not an expert, but I can certainly talk to somebody. That is not on my list, but let me know. Anyways, start with your Pokemon or win condition and then go from there. So let's start with an example now, shall we? So this example we are going to talk about is ADP-Z, or Arceus Dialga Palkia and Zacian V. That is a very popular deck, pretty good deck. So I will go over for you how this deck gets built and then talk about those principles. So the first thing is, with this deck, we really are inspired by this Pokemon, first and foremost. Now, why this Pokemon? Well, not only is he a really big, beefy Pokemon who can do a lot of damage, really what matters is Altered Creation GX. This is the win condition that we have decided to go for this deck. Now, Altered Creation says for 1 metal energy and a water energy, you not only do 30 more damage when you use your GX attack, you'll do 30 more damage, all of your Pokemon for the rest of the game. And every time you knock out your opponent's active Pokemon with an attack, with damage, you take an extra prize card. So if it's a 1 prize Pokemon, you'll take 1. If it's a 2 prize, 1 prize, you'll take 2. If it's a 2 prize Pokemon, you'll take 3 prizes. And if it's a 3 prize Pokemon like this one, you will end up taking 4 prizes. So this is a good way to take all of your prize cards very, very fast. Now, that is the win condition. We are taking prize cards and we're trying to take them fast with Pokemon that hit really hard. So we have these 3 Pokemon as attackers. And the other half of the equation, other attackers that we want to lean into, are Zacian V. Now, Zacian V is a good attacker because its only attack does 230 damage for 3 energy. Now, 230 damage used to knock out a lot of Pokemon. It still does knock out a lot of Pokemon. And when you add in the 30 damage here, it does 260. There are even more ways you can add damage to things, but basically 260 damage is a lot. You can knock out a lot of Pokemon that way, especially 2 prize Pokemon. So if you're playing against a lot of people who put 2 prize Pokemon that you can knock out with 1 hit, and you can take 3 prizes off of those, you only have to knock out 2 Pokemon a whole game. So those are our main attackers. That's where we start with this deck. We think that, okay, this Pokemon lets us take extra prizes. This Pokemon does a lot of damage. It can knock things out. Boom. Now, the next question that you have in any circumstance like this is, how do you accelerate your energy, right? You have your attackers, you have your win condition. How are you getting energy onto these Pokemon? for this deck that has a few really good ways of doing that, which is why this deck is so good. The first way that it can do that is you can manually attach to this Pokemon, basically. And its first attack, Ultimate Ray, it does normally 150, but after you attack with this, you can search your deck for 3 energy, basic energy, and attach them to your Pokemon in any way you like. So if you attack with this, you can go get 3 energy out of your deck and attach them to another one of these, attach them to these, whatever. So that's a really great way you can accelerate energy. Now, other decks have different ways of accelerating energy. You have things like Welder in fire decks. Welder allows you to attach, if it's a supporter that you can play, and you can attach 2 energy from your hand, 2 fire energy, to one of your Pokemon, and then you draw 3 cards, so it's very good. There are lots of decks that have lots of different energy acceleration. The important thing to know is, if your deck doesn't have energy acceleration that's like additional to just 1 attachment per turn, if it doesn't have that, then you want to make sure your Pokemon have very low energy costs. So if you can attack with just 1 attachment, then you don't necessarily need some extra acceleration. If you can't, then you need to figure out how you're going to get your attacks off, or if you can survive. So Zacian takes 3 metal energy, and that's a lot. But like I said, you can power that up with ADP, or you can even power it up with its ability, Intrepid Sword. You use this ability, you end your turn, you draw the top 3 cards off the top of your deck, and if any of them are a metal energy, you can attach them to this Pokemon. You don't have to, but you can. So that's another way we accelerate energy. So that's 2 ways this deck can accelerate energy. And there's actually one more. There is a card called Metal Saucer. Metal Saucer allows you to, if you play it, attach a metal energy from your discard pile to one of your benched metal Pokemon. Now, this card here is not a metal Pokemon, so you can't attach it to him, but you can attach it to Zacian. So, in terms of energy acceleration, you basically have 3 different ways of accelerating energy in this deck that all combine to be very powerful. So that's really the second principle. Anytime you're thinking about building a deck, make sure that their Pokemon have a way to get energy on quickly, or don't need a lot of energy to begin with. A lot of decks that you might see out there that don't do as well fail because people don't keep that in mind. They just are going to manually attach every single turn. And, against a really good deck, that means that the Pokemon's not going to survive long enough to actually get the attack off. Another really important principle beyond energy acceleration is just consistency, right? Consistency basically means, how are you going to make sure that your deck does what it needs to do, gets set up, etc., every single game consistently, right? There's a variety of different cards that let you do that. The first kind of card for that is, well, you need to be able to find your Pokemon, right? Every single deck should have a lot of these cards in it if you can. And for this deck, in standard format, we have something called Quick Ball. Quick Ball says, discard a card from your hand and search your deck for a basic Pokemon, put it into your hand. So Quick Ball is a good card. It's a consistency card that allows you to go find whatever Pokemon you want, so long as it's a basic Pokemon. Now, we are going to put 4 of those in our deck because we want to have those at the beginning of the game as best we can. Anytime you want something to definitely be in your hand to start the game, think about putting 4 cards of that in your deck if you have space. And then outside of just 4 Quick Balls, I'm going to put in 2 Pokemon Communications. Pokemon Communication lets you take a Pokemon in your hand and put it back into your deck and search out a different Pokemon of any kind. So this is very good, not only in this deck, because maybe you can put something in that you don't want to discard and find anything you want, but in lots of other decks too, you can go find evolution Pokemon with Pokemon Communication. There's also cards like Evolution Incense and a variety of different cards that let you search for Pokemon, basically. Pokeball is another one. It's not consistent because you have to flip a coin, but you can technically use it. The next thing we want to think about with consistency is, how do we draw through and see a lot of cards in our deck as quickly as possible? So every turn, what you want to do, usually the decks that win are decks that can see a lot of the cards in their deck very quickly. That helps you get set up. So one thing you can do is play supporter cards. Supporter cards are cards you can only play once a turn, usually. But when you play them, they usually have very good effects. This card here is called Professor's Research. It says discard your hand and then draw 7 cards off the top of your deck. That is very good because you can see sometimes your hand only has 1 or 2 cards in it and you don't care about those cards. So this lets you get a whole new set of 7 cards in your hand. It is a great way of drawing through your deck, seeing a lot of cards every single turn. And we have 4 of them in this deck because we want to make sure we always have access to it. Another great consistency card that's a supporter is Marnie. Now Marnie lets you shuffle your hand and then put that on the bottom of your deck. And if you played it, you draw 5 cards. It's not as good as Research in terms of seeing as many cards, but it doesn't get rid of the cards in your hand, which is important sometimes. And what it does also is it makes your opponent do the same thing and only draw 4 cards. So it's good at also disrupting your opponent. That's a more advanced strategy in terms of deck building. Really, you want to keep this in here just to have even more supporters that help you draw cards. So we have Pokemon Search, and we have cards that let you draw more cards. There are even more cards that let you see other cards in your deck. Some decks, a lot of decks actually, like to play things like Jirachi. This Jirachi from Team Up has an ability called Stellar Wish. What it does is you can look at the top 5 cards of your deck, and then you can pick one trainer card you find there and put it into your hand. The Pokemon then goes to sleep, so you might need to find a way to get it out of the active once you use it, but there are lots of cards that can help with that. But yes, Jirachi is another way to see 5 more cards into your deck on a given turn, and you can use multiple of these in a turn potentially, so you can see a lot of cards that way. So we have Research to discard your hand and draw 7, Marnie to draw another 5, Jirachi to look at the top 5 cards, and then finally you can even use other Pokemon like Dedenne. Dedenne allows you to discard your hand and draw 6 cards if you play it from your hand onto the bench. Another great way to see more cards. You can do Research, Jirachi, Dedenne, all in the same turn. So you're sort of seeing a pattern here of seeing as many cards on certain turns as possible. So as you can see, there's a lot of consistency in this because our strategy is to get this GX attack off as soon as possible and then start hitting with Zacian as soon as possible. So we put a lot of cards in here to let us see as many cards as possible to get that going. Now, there are a few other consistency cards we put in this deck because it is very important. We are also putting 2 energy spinners in this deck. The reason we've done this for this deck in particular is because we need both metal and water energy. And we're not going to run a lot of water energy because we only need 1, 2, or 3 in a whole deck. But Energy Spinner lets us go and search out any energy that we want from our deck. So this is a very good card to go find that water energy when you need to use its GX attack. So more consistency here in finding that. And then an advanced strategy for this is we also play Energy Switch. Now these 2 cards here, and a few of these cards, you're not going to see them in every deck, but these are consistencies for this deck in particular. Energy Switch allows you to switch an energy from one Pokemon to another, and the reason it helps with this deck is you can attach 1 energy for your turn to this card, a water energy, and if you can play a Metal Saucer and get an energy from your discard into this, and then play an Energy Switch, you can power this Pokemon up in 1 turn with both energy that it needs. So that's very important to get off your GX attack on your first turn, even if you go second. So we're playing 3 of these to make sure we can find it very early. Now, that is the majority of the consistency cards. Additionally, we have some other cards that help consistency that maybe aren't as direct. I think a lot of decks need to play switching cards to get out of the active, so we're going to play 4 here because Jirachi goes to sleep and need to be switched. Maybe you need to get into your Arceus Dialga Palkia, etc. And then because this deck really wants to take, knockouts every turn to take all those extra prizes, we might want to play other cards that let you bring whatever Pokemon up from your opponent's bench that you want. So we're going to play 3 Boss's Orders, which let you do just that. This is not consistency in terms of seeing your deck as much as it is consistency in terms of activating your win condition. So all of this right now, you can see is a lot of a deck, right? Like we already have most of the deck already here. And then we get to the last principle in deck building. So for that last principle, we're going to talk about energy counts. So we've gone over what are your win conditions, what Pokemon do you need in your deck to meet that win condition, what are all the energy acceleration, what are all the consistency cards that let you get that strategy going, and then finally, how much energy do you need? It's important to know that if you don't put enough energy in your deck, you might miss energy when you need it, and that can cause you to lose. And if you put too much energy in a specific deck, you might end up with a handful of energy and nothing to do with them. And that's just as bad. So balancing the amount of energy that you need and the type of energy that you need is important. So what we know in terms of this deck is the main Pokemon we want to attack with are Zacian and ADP. Now those Pokemon need mostly metal energy, but this one also needs water energy. So this deck actually needs 2 energy types. And when I look at the attack cost, this requires 3 metal, and this, for its main attack, other than the GX, needs 3 energy total, one of which has to be water. So we both have 3 energy costs here. So if you can assume that your opponent needs to go through, in a perfect world, 3 of these Pokemon, then you probably should have a minimum of 9 energy in a deck. That's just a good way to do math off the top of your head. If you need 9 energy for 3 different attackers throughout the course of a game, then make sure your deck has 9 energy. And then how you do the energy split is really about what energy do you want to see most often. So for this deck, we actually are playing 4, 8, 9 metal energy. You can certainly have a couple more or maybe 1 less metal energy, but metal energy is the most important one, and we want to see them early so that we can get them into the discard for Metal Saucer. But 9 energy is a good place to start. And then for water energy, because we only need one once in the game to use its altered creation, that's really all we need. We want to make sure that we don't have it in the prizes, so we need more than 1. So you could either play 2 or maybe 3 water energy if you want to be safe. And remember, you can go find the water energy with Energy Spinner. Now again, every deck is going to be different. You might run a deck that only needs 1 kind of energy, so you don't have to worry about different types and how much you need of each. Most decks only run 1 kind of energy. But the rule of thumb is, if you only need 1 kind, see how much you need to do what you need to attack for all the attackers you might use in a game, and then maybe add 1 or 2 to that just to make sure you can find it. And yeah, that's really the energy count part. And this has just been an example of one deck. Every deck is going to be a little different, but like I said, win conditions, Pokemon, energy acceleration, consistency, and energy. Those are really the 5 components that you need to figure out when you're building a deck. And it's important to know that I put a bunch of cards down here. You can change things, obviously, but we still have 6 empty sleeves left. And those 6 sleeves can be used for anything you want. Look at what other people are playing. Look at, what else is being played in your area and say, what's a good card to combat that, right? Every deck is going to have a few of those spaces left over for extra cards that might be useful in certain matchups. So yeah, this has just been an example. Hopefully this was helpful to you in terms of how to build a deck. I know this was a bit lengthy, but this tells you the process that you probably should go through. Yeah, let me know if you have any questions in the comment section down below, and look out for the other deck building series, videos in the series that are going to be coming out, where we talk about different types of decks that you build. They're going to be a little bit more advanced, but now that you know the basics, everything should make a little bit more sense. Yeah, thank you so much for watching. Subscribe if you like this stuff, and I'll catch y'all in a future video. Carpe awesome.